In our living room, we had this big, glossy oak shelf my dad built himself, back when he still believed in manual labor and before YouTube tutorials made everyone a woodworker. It held every single one of Joseph's trophies. Soccer, debate, honor roll, even a perfect attendance certificate from the 5th grade that, frankly, should have gone to my mom's SUV for doing all the actual work. My section? A dusty corner on the bottom left. One participation ribbon from a science fair where my volcano exploded early and hit the vice principal's slacks. My dad called it the shelf of humble beginnings. I called it a passive-aggressive insult that needed dusting. Joseph was 3 years older, taller, shinier. He looked like the product of a genetically optimized bloodline. I, on the other hand, looked like the before in a puberty documentary. If Joseph was the golden boy, I was the plastic fork you get with takeout, functional, but forgettable. Our parents never even pretended to hide it. When Joseph got into Yale, there was a banner on the garage and a catered backyard party. When I got accepted into the state college with a partial scholarship, my dad said, "That's respectable." Respectable. Like I told him I was becoming a mid-tier magician or going on a juice cleanse. But I didn't complain. I just internalized it. Like a champ. I worked. A lot. Between part-time jobs and freelance coding gigs, I stayed up so late some nights the sunrise felt like a betrayal. I didn't have the luxury of waiting for someone to believe in me. I had to hustle like every no was an invitation to burn the whole blueprint and start again. My dream wasn't even glory, it was space. Space to prove I wasn't just a backup son. My relationship with Joseph? Cordial. Like coworkers who know HR is listening. He didn't bully me. He didn't praise me either. Mostly he'd pat my shoulder and say things like, "You've got a good work ethic," which always sounded like, "You're not talented, but hey, nice try." The moment I remember best wasn't a slap or a fight. It was quiet. Surgical. After Joseph's graduation, our family threw this ridiculous banquet-style dinner. My dad gave a toast that sounded like it was written by a presidential speechwriter on Adderall. "To Joseph," he said, raising a glass. "The son who never let us down." I clapped like the trained monkey I'd become. Then my dad pulled me aside near the restrooms, because nothing says fatherly wisdom like stale urinal cakes, and said low and calm, "You'll always be second place, son. That's not an insult, it's just how the world works." I didn't react. Not a flinch. Just nodded. Like the good, obedient, second-tier son I was supposed to be. But in that moment, something inside me crystallized. Not anger. Not sadness. Just clarity. A kind of internal stillness that said, "Cool. So we're done pretending." What my dad didn't know, what he never bothered to ask, was that I'd been working on a project of my own. A platform. Niche logistics tech, built for small businesses to streamline their inventory systems. My own code. My own prototype. I'd pitched it to 3 people already. All no's. Joseph had pitched his app to a high-profile investor the week before graduation. A social media thing, basically Tinder for dog owners. Rejected. Politely, but decisively. A month later my phone rang. Same investor. Said he liked my prototype. Said Joseph had mentioned me once, offhand, like I was some kind of background technician. "But I looked into your work," he added. "I think it has legs." I nearly dropped my coffee. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. I wore my best thrift store blazer and borrowed confidence. I walked into that office not as someone's brother, not as a shadow, but as someone with a pitch deck and a spine. And he backed me. Fully. Seed funding. Office space. Real equity. Now, 6 months later, I'm in my downtown office. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Noise-canceling walls. Plant I haven't killed yet. And the receptionist just buzzed me. "There's a man in the lobby. Says he's your dad. He's here with a resume." I leaned back in my chair. Sipped my coffee. Smiled. "Well," I said. "Tell him second place is busy." The night after the investor said yes, I didn't celebrate. I stress-ordered pad thai, sat in my old desk chair with a crack in the back, and stared at my laptop like it was holding a live grenade. My prototype was solid, but turning code into a company? That was a different beast. I spent the next 2 weeks swimming in legal templates, EIN applications, domain names, and panic Googling phrases like seed funding tax structure and how not to get sued as a founder. Sleep was a rumor. Coffee was an identity. The startup world? Less. Silicon Valley vibe. And more. Freelancer with a whiteboard taped to his closet door. But I was in it. LoopLogic started as a duct tape dream, 1 page of code, a few rough wireframes, and my bank account sobbing quietly in the background. I hired no one. I worked from the corner of my apartment, wedged between a floor lamp and my laundry pile, with sticky notes doubling as UX strategy. I didn't tell my parents right away. Not because I was hiding it. But because, what was the point? They'd seen me build things before, school projects, tiny freelance apps, and their reaction was always the same. A polite nod? That's great, buddy. A follow-up question about how Joseph was doing. Still, I sent them a short email after I landed my first client. A local bookstore chain in Ohio that wanted real-time inventory syncing between their website and dusty point-of-sale systems. My dad's reply was 2 sentences. That's impressive. Small business is a good start. My mom just sent back a smiley face. Not the emoji. The typed-out kind, like this smiley face. It was wild. I just secured my first contract, was building a company from scratch, and they responded like I'd fixed the printer. Meanwhile, Joseph was still doing brand strategy consulting, which basically meant he posted long motivational threads on Twitter with hashtags like #RiseAndGrind and #VisionBoardVibes. But even then, the spotlight stayed on him. A family dinner got scheduled a few weeks later. We hadn't had one in months. I debated skipping it, but Joe, my roommate and best friend, not to be confused with Joseph, important distinction, said, "Go." "What's the worst that could happen?" I said. "My dad might use the phrase respectable again, and I might spontaneously combust." He said, "Worth the risk." So I went. Joseph was, of course, seated at the head of the table, like he was waiting for someone to carve a roast that didn't exist. He was in a navy blazer and loafers with no socks. He said the phrase, "high-level conversations," twice before the salad even landed. When my mom asked how work was going, Joseph launched into a TED Talk about branding ecosystems. He got applause. Literal applause, from Aunt Rachel, who sells vitamin sachets online and thinks Joseph is basically a CEO. Then my dad turned to me. "You still working on that program?" he asked. I nodded. "LoopLogic's. It's going well. First client signed last month." My mom blinked. "So it's real?" There it was. So, it's real. Like I'd been pretending this whole time. Like real, only counted once Joseph mentioned it first. I just smiled. "Yeah. It's real." She nodded vaguely. "That's good. Stability is important." Stability. I'd been surviving on caffeine, freelance contracts, and prayers to the Wi-Fi gods. But sure, call it stable. The rest of the night was a blur of Joseph's stories, passive compliments, and me swirling my drink like it held the answers. I left early. Didn't say goodbye. Just waved from the driveway and drove home with the windows down, trying to shake the sense that no matter how far I climbed, I was still on the second rung of their imaginary ladder. Back at the apartment, I found Joe on the couch eating cereal straight from the box. "How was it?" he asked. I tossed my jacket on a chair. "I could have sent a cardboard cutout and no one would have noticed." Joe handed me the cereal. "Still got your first client though." "Yeah," I said. "And a second call booked for tomorrow. Real one. Big deal." He raised his eyebrows. "Investor?" I nodded. He grinned. "Then screw the dinner. Let's build an empire." And we did. Slowly. One client at a time. I didn't post about it. I didn't send a newsletter. I just kept showing up. Meanwhile, my family still treated me like I was trying to win bronze in a race they already finished. Until the week everything changed. But that starts with a manila folder. At 9:13 a.m. on a Monday, Becca buzzed my office like there was a fire. Or worse, an uninvited parent. "Hey," she said, "there's a guy downstairs. Dad energy. Holding a manila folder like it owes him child support." I paused mid-sip. "He give a name?" "Carter." Didn't specify if he's senior or just desperate. I stared at my coffee. Then out the window. Then at my name on the office door. "Tell him I'll be down." I didn't rush. Just buttoned my blazer, straightened a stack of papers I wasn't going to read, and made peace with whatever version of this conversation was about to happen. When the elevator doors opened, I saw him immediately, standing awkwardly next to the plant wall like it might offer moral support. The manila folder was tucked under one arm. Same haircut, same posture, but his eyes, they were searching. "Son," he said. "Dad." We shook hands. His grip used to be firm. Now it felt more like a question. "I wanted to drop this off," he said, offering the folder. "Thought there might be an opening. Consulting, maybe? I've got experience with logistics. Operations." I nodded, took the folder, didn't open it. Joseph mentioned Loop Logics was doing well. He added, like that explained why he was here, asking. We stood in silence. One of those weirdly clean lobby silences where everything smells faintly of citrus and furniture polish. "You know," I said, "after Joseph's graduation, you told me I'd always be second place." His jaw tightened. "I remember. You meant it." I thought I did. That should have landed harder. But it didn't. I wasn't angry. Just done. "You're not here because I'm family," I said. "You're here because things got quiet on your end." He didn't argue. "I never thought you'd get this far," he admitted. "I underestimated you." "I know." He exhaled like someone who's finally run out of reruns to play in his head. "I'm not asking for a handout. Didn't think you were." I handed back the folder. "We're not hiring right now. But you're welcome to apply next cycle." His hands tightened around the folder. Not out of anger. Just surprise. Then he nodded, slow, measured. "You sound like a CEO." I smiled. "I am." He left without asking for a tour. Didn't offer advice. Just pushed the door open and walked out into the sunlight like a man realizing the promotion had already been filled. Back upstairs, Becca raised an eyebrow. "Well?" he applied. She smirked. "Want me to lose the folder?" "Nah," I said. "Let it sit there for a while." Then I stepped back into my office. Sat in my chair. Looked at the skyline. Same city. Different altitude. You know what's wild? When Joseph started slipping, no one said a word. Not at first. "No, we're worried about him." No whispered concerns over brunch. Just silence. Like the golden child glitching out wasn't a thing anyone was emotionally equipped to process. The first clue was his LinkedIn post. A 10-paragraph epic titled, "Why Stepping Away Can Be a Power Move." It sounded noble. Like he'd decided to take a sabbatical to find himself. Reality? His startup ran out of cash 3 months into launch after spending half the seed round on branded hoodies and a culture consultant. Then came the Twitter purge. He went from posting daily hustle quotes, "Winners work while others sleep," to radio silence. I knew something was up when he deleted the entire Dogrally website. Even the stock photo of a corgi in sunglasses was gone. That corgi deserved better. Around the same time, I got a text from Mom. It said, "Just checking in. Hope you're still doing your little tech company," smiling face with smiling eyes. Still doing was doing some serious lifting in that sentence. As if my life's work was a weekend garage sale she hoped I'd wrapped up by now. I replied with a screenshot of our client dashboard, 28 active users. 4 new in the past week. She replied with a thumbs up. The emoji this time. Progress? Meanwhile, Joseph came over for dinner one Sunday and brought a bottle of red wine he'd clearly Googled the name of on the way there. He smiled too wide, laughed too loud, and used the word pivot 5 times in one conversation. Classic founder on the ropes energy. "I'm not failing," he told the room. "I'm evolving." Dad nodded like he was hearing Steve Jobs reincarnated. I stayed quiet. Not because I was bitter, but because I'd finally learned that letting people underestimate you is exhausting, correcting them constantly. Worse. That night, as dishes clinked and Joseph held court, my mom asked him, gently, "Do you think you'll rebrand Dogrally? Or maybe consult for others?" He took a long sip of wine. "I'm exploring." Which is code for, "I don't know what I'm doing, but let me keep my narrative." After dessert, my dad pulled me aside, same old routine, and said, "You've been quiet tonight. You okay?" "I'm great," I said. "We just onboarded a logistics firm in Texas. They found us through a referral." He nodded slowly. "That's solid?" "Solid. Not amazing. Not impressive. Just the verbal equivalent of a pat on the head." Then he glanced toward Joseph, who was now Googling what goes with goat cheese. "You know," he added, "your brother's had a rough patch lately." I blinked. "Yeah. I noticed. He's under a lot of pressure. Always had more eyes on him, you know." I wanted to laugh. More eyes? Try more lifeboats. Every time Joseph fumbled, someone was already there with a net, a grant, or a TEDx speaking slot. When I fumbled, I got silence. Or, "That's just life, son." But I didn't say that. I just nodded. He'll figure it out. Because I wasn't playing the same game anymore. Joe, my roommate again, not my brother, said something the next night that stuck with me. We were eating takeout, watching YouTube documentaries about abandoned malls. "Very on brand," he said. "You realize you've lapped him, right?" I shrugged. "I'm not racing." "Exactly. That's why you're winning." I laughed. Sounds like a tweet he'd post with a sunrise photo. "Yeah," Joe said. "But when you say it, it's true." I thought about that for a long time. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing anything. Not his approval. Not my family's validation. Not even revenge. I was just living. And then one morning, Becca buzzed me again. "There's someone here for you," she said. "Not your dad this time. Worse." "Joseph?" "Bingo. He looks disheveled. Like he lost a pitch and found a mirror." I sighed. Send him up. Because I knew what was coming. And I was finally ready to hear it. Joseph walked into my office like someone trying very hard not to look out of place. He wore a wrinkled button-up, one collar tip curled like a sad wing. His shoes were nice, still polished, but the rest of him looked like a resume with coffee stains. He gave a forced smile. "Wow. You've got a view." "Yeah," I said. "The kind you get when your app doesn't match Shih Tzus with Rottweilers." His jaw flexed. Not a full grimace. Just a twitch, like he knew I'd earned that jab and didn't get to protest. He sat down without asking. I waited. He looked around like he was hoping the air conditioning would speak first. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I wanted to talk. Becca warned me." He chuckled, but it died quickly. "I'm not here to grovel," he said. "Then this'll be short." He frowned. "Come on, man." "I'm trying." "Try harder." He stared at the floor. For once, no clever comebacks. No, bro. Energy. Just silence. Then he looked up. I failed. I blinked. "Sorry, what?" "I failed." He repeated. "Dogrally's dead. The money's gone. The team's scattered. And the last investor I pitched to said, and I quote, 'This feels like a business school parody assignment.'" Ouch. Yeah. Silence again. Not tense, just tired. "I guess," he said slowly. "I thought I was immune to it. Failing. Falling. Being ignored." I leaned back. "You were. Until now." He nodded. "It's weird. You spend your whole life thinking you're the main character, and then one day you wake up and realize you're not even on the poster." That line surprised me. Because it was honest. And coming from Joseph, that was rarer than snow in July. He glanced at the LoopLogix logo on the wall. "You built something real." "I know. I used to think you were just the tech guy. Good with code. Quiet. Safe. Translation, background character with potential. He winced. Yeah. But you made noise, he added. You didn't scream. You didn't grandstand. You just built. I raised an eyebrow. What do you want, Joseph? He sighed. A seat at the table. Which one? The one I wasn't invited to, or the one I built myself? That's fair, he admitted. Look, I'm not asking for charity. I'm lost. And I figured, if I'm going to ask for help, better from you than another fake founder trying to sell me motivation podcasts. That made me laugh. Mostly because it sounded exactly like something he would have said 6 months ago. But this time, it had weight. You know I can't just hand you a job, I said. I know. And I'm not interested in fixing your image. Also fair. But, I said, if you're serious about starting from scratch, learning, failing without needing a PR spin, I might have a place. Intern level. No perks. No title. His eyes flicked up. Intern? Yep. Like, get coffee and make slide decks level? Exactly. And if Becca doesn't like you, you're out in a week. He swallowed. Deal. Just like that. No tantrum. No drama. Just the golden child finally getting off the pedestal and stepping onto solid ground. I stood up and extended a hand. You still know how to use Google Sheets? He smirked. Barely. Perfect. You're hired. As an intern. He laughed, a little sheepish. Mom's gonna hate this. She'll survive. And maybe, so would we. The text came from my mom 3 days later. Your brother said he's interning? For you? Is that true or some kind of sibling prank? I stared at my phone for a solid minute before responding with a thumbs up emoji and nothing else. It felt poetic. The next message came in 20 minutes later. You know how sensitive he is right now. Sure. Sensitive. Now that the startup fairy tale had crumbled and the golden spotlight had shifted 1 degree west, we were suddenly concerned about Joseph's emotional wellness. Nobody texted me about my sensitivity when I was eating dollar store ramen and building loop logics from a laptop with a flickering screen. But I didn't bite. Joseph had agreed to intern. That meant no special treatment. No family discounts. And definitely no, let's just bump him up to junior executive because he used to be the favorite. Energy. He showed up on time, though. Every day. He wore the same navy blazer for a week straight until Becca finally handed him a sticky note that said, "Try laundry. It's character development." He took it well. He sat in meetings and didn't interrupt. Took notes. Ran errands. Didn't pretend to know more than he did. The first week, I assigned him to help one of our sales reps consolidate onboarding data. Boring stuff. Not glamorous. But it mattered. He didn't complain. One afternoon, he walked into my office carrying 2 coffees, his and one for me. No flashy grin. Just handed it over like a peace treaty brewed with oat milk. I nodded. Thanks. He shrugged. Figured it was cheaper than years of therapy. We were getting somewhere. But the family? Not so much. At dinner the following weekend, my dad made a show of asking Joseph, "How's work going?" Joseph, to his credit, said, "Harder than I thought. But good." My mom frowned like someone had just told her her favorite soap opera was cancelled. I just don't understand. Why not do your own thing again? Joseph smiled. Because I already did. And it didn't work. She blinked like the concept was offensive. Then she turned to me. And you're okay with this? Him working under you? I sipped my water. I didn't hire him. He applied. She blinked. Twice. My dad shifted uncomfortably. Well, maybe he could grow into a bigger role. Maybe, I said. When he earns it. It was the first time I saw Joseph smile at something I said in public. Like really smile. Not the plastic family photo smile. The kind that says, yeah? There. And in that moment, something subtle clicked. Not forgiveness. Not a dramatic shift. But respect. The table felt different after that. Lighter. Not warm yet, but less like a cold war with mashed potatoes. Later that night, As we left, Joseph pulled me aside. You ever think they'll see it? I raised an eyebrow. See what? That we both made it. Just different ways. I exhaled. Honestly? I stopped needing them to see it. That's when I finally did. He nodded. Working under you sucks a little, he said. But in a way that's probably good for me. I smirked. Yeah. Humility's not fatal. Just awkward. He laughed. Especially when Becca's involved. We said nothing for a second. No handshakes. No hugs. Just a silent understanding that we were rewriting something, slowly, messily, without burning the entire family tree. The next morning, Joseph was early. Becca raised an eyebrow and whispered, "Is this what growth looks like?" I said, "If it is, I'm scared." Then we got to work. Because while Joseph's startup had crashed, mine was still climbing, and for the first time, he wasn't pretending to lead. He was following. And learning. And maybe, just maybe, becoming someone worth working with, not just tolerating. Joseph had been interning with us for a month. And weirdly, he was thriving. He stopped trying to impress people and just listened. He showed up early, stayed late, and actually started using words like workflow, unironically. Becca even stopped side-eyeing him after he fixed the supply chain spreadsheet she'd spent 2 days cursing at. "You might not be useless," she told him once. Joseph grinned like he'd been knighted. He still wore loafers with no socks, but hey, growth takes time. Meanwhile, I was catching up with myself. The company was growing faster than I could pace my own emotions. We hit 30 clients. Signed our first West Coast partner. And suddenly, I was having to say things like, "Let's circle back on the deliverables," without laughing. Then, because the universe has a sense of humor, I got a calendar invite from my dad. Subject: coffee and conversation. Time: Friday, 11 a.m. Location: my own office. Not, "Can we talk?" Not even a text. An actual Outlook invite. Color-coded. I almost declined it just to prove a point, but Becca saw it pop up and said, "Please accept that. I need the material." So I clicked. Yes. Friday came. He arrived 10 minutes early. I kept him waiting 5, not out of spite, but because I was on a call with a real estate group interested in enterprise integration. Priorities. When I stepped out, he stood up like he was meeting a senator. "Thanks for making time," he said. I gestured to the glass conference room. "Let's do this in here. It has walls." We sat. I waited. He adjusted his cuffs like he was preparing for a confession. "I've been thinking," he started. Dangerous opening. "About you. About Joseph. About how I handled things over the years." I said nothing. Just sipped my coffee. He cleared his throat. "I know I was hard on you. That's one word. I thought I was motivating you. You were motivating Joseph." He nodded. "And maybe pushing you down in the process." Silence. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out, no joke, a folded piece of paper. I assumed it was another resume. It wasn't. It was a handwritten note. "I started writing something," he said. "Figured I owed you more than a pat on the back." I unfolded it. The top line read, "To my son, the CEO." I nearly choked on my coffee. He looked embarrassed. "Okay, that part was corny. But I meant it." The rest of the note was rough. Sentences started strong and trailed off. There were too many ellipses. At one point, he referred to loop logics as your tech for me thing, which I'm still processing. But it was real. An actual attempt. A gesture. And from a man whose emotional vocabulary consisted mostly of grunts and life lessons about engine oil, it was a leap. "I don't expect things to reset," he said. "But I wanted you to know I see it now. All of it. You're not second place. You never were." I let that hang in the air. Not because I didn't believe him, but because it had taken so long to hear. "I appreciate that," I said finally. He looked relieved. Then, being him, he added, "Also, your mother wants to know if you'll be coming to Thanksgiving." I raised an eyebrow. "Depends." "On what?" On whether I'm sitting at the kids' table again. He actually laughed. There. We stood. He extended a hand again. This time, it wasn't stiff. Just sincere. As he left, Becca poked her head in. Do we forgive him? She asked. Not yet, I said. But maybe we let him buy the pie this year. She nodded. Only if it's pecan. And store-bought. So he suffers. I smiled. Because somehow, after all the noise, we'd landed somewhere stable. Not perfect. But real. It was a Wednesday when Joseph barged into my office, holding his laptop like it was on fire. Bro, he said. Did you see the inbox? No, I said. Because unlike you, I don't check the general inbox at panic speed. He flipped the laptop around. It was an email from a regional startup accelerator. Apparently, someone had nominated Loop Logics for a small business impact grant. We'd made the shortlist. That's great, I said, smiling. Joseph stared at me. You don't get it. You're gonna be in a feature video. Spotlight founder. Press run. Investors. They said someone from the original pitch team needs to do the video. I blinked. You mean me? He grinned. Yep. Front and center. No more background character. Later that week, we filmed the spotlight video. It was just me, a stool, and a camera crew with way too many questions. They asked about the early days. The prototype. The ramen. The rejections. Then they asked about my support system. I mentioned Joe, of course. My roommate who fed me fries while I stress-coded and told me I wasn't insane. I mentioned Becca, who proofread my first client contract and made fun of my font choices until I upgraded. Then I paused. I almost didn't say it. But I did. I learned to stop chasing validation, I said to the camera. Especially from people who confuse praise with weakness. Sometimes the only person who believes in you is the one staring at a blank Google Doc at 2 a.m. And that has to be enough. They asked me to smile at the end. I didn't. I just looked into the lens and said, Thanks for coming to my origin story. After that, things moved fast. We hired 2 more devs. Landed our first government contract. Joseph moved out of intern status, slowly, hesitantly, into associate. Becca let him in on her favorite lunch spot. That was basically a promotion. Then came the reunion. A Carter family Thanksgiving. Full attendance. Roasted tension. We were halfway through dinner when my dad raised his glass. To family, he said. To unexpected journeys. Generic. Safe. But then he turned to me. And to the one who built something out of nothing. Who proved me wrong. The room went quiet. Even the cranberry sauce paused mid-slide. Joseph looked over at me and mouthed, Holy crap. I nodded. We clinked glasses. Later, as everyone cleared plates and started pretending to like each other again, Joseph and I ended up out back, on the porch. He leaned against the railing. Still weird? Extremely. But kind of nice? Yeah, I said. Kind of. He smirked. Remember when Dad said you'd always be second place? Vividly. He pointed toward the house, where my dad was trying to understand how to use an air fryer. Well, Joseph said, now he reports to you. Technically. I smiled. Nah. He doesn't report to me. Joseph frowned. He doesn't? Nope. I never hired him. Joseph laughed so hard he choked on his cider. Wait, what? He thinks? He sent in an application. I sent back a "we'll keep your resume on file" email. Savage. Fair, I said. He taught me that. We looked out over the backyard. The same place we'd played tag as kids, except now the stakes were different. No more racing to beat each other to the fence. No more measuring success by who Mom clapped for loudest. Now it was about something else entirely. I wasn't in second place. I just stopped running in a race someone else invented.